Coffee Pot Conversations.
On this episode, I discuss Lido in Paris, and you will note that I utilise French a small splattering of times, so apologies for my pronunciation and accent and lack of French. 2 points that I want to raise though. The first is two little sound issues cropped up. I'm not too sure what they were, but I only noticed it when I listened back to the podcast, and because I'm keeping things nice and basic, I'm not going to go and start cutting and splicing, because that's just not what I'm about. The other thing is grammatically, I think I made a little bit of a whoopsie where I mentioned about the demolition of the Lido. I was referring to the one in Vegas, but it may come across as the one in Paris. So aside from that, it's not a bad little short episode on an Englishman in Paris. Coffee Pot Conversations.
Coffee Pot Conversations.
I went to the theatre the other night to watch Annie the musical. It wasn't one of those big posh London Theatreland theatres. It was a smaller venue, about an hour's drive away from me down in Southend. And the theatre itself wasn't too bad. It's more of a venue than a theatre, so they do other productions, like Stevie Wonder tributes, Elton John acts, things like that, as well as obviously musicals. I've got Rocky Horror Show coming up shortly. It's a very shallow rake in the stalls. Further back, it's not particularly steep either, and they've got a little circle upstairs. It was okay. I like sitting on the edge so I can cut through looking at the wings. Throwback from my old theatre days. The problem with the shallow rake, so everyone's sitting on the same level, is if you're a little bit shorter, or a lot shorter like my boys and my girlfriend, then it can be a bit tricky popping your head through looking at the stage. For me, being just over 6'3" and a bit, I didn't really have a problem. But so at the show, and where Daddy Warbucks takes Grace and Annie to New York to watch a show, out come these 6 or 8 dancers, all dressed up in their sailor outfits, and the men are wearing like their mariniere tops, the navy and white stripes, their white trousers, and the ladies are wearing red, white and blue outfits. Amazing dance routine. The dancers, I'm not going to lie, were fabulous. There were some really sharp movements, which I don't know if it was professional, but I don't know how professional. I don't know if they were sort of like the local talent or if they're part of the tour ensemble, but they were good. This is the first routine that you see. It was a hard impacting dance, and it was amazing to watch, especially from someone with a critical eye like me. But anyways, while these ladies were dancing, it took me back I suppose 18 months to when I took Nev to the Moulin Rouge. So this episode is not about the Moulin Rouge, nor is it really about the cabarets of Paris or the entertainment scene in London. It's about the Lido. I remember my uncle always telling me, whenever I said about going to the Moulin Rouge or even the Champs-Élysées, he always told me the story about when he went to Paris, flew over, dropped his bags off at the hotel, went straight to Lido de Paris, saw the show, then went back, stayed overnight at the hotel, jumped on the plane and went back, came back home to London the following morning. And one of the things that stuck in his head, which he still to this day talks about, was the whole grand thing of the swimming pool and the water where the stage opens. Up come the ladies and down goes the audience, and all of the rest of the crazy hurrahs that were going there with the topless ladies and the exotic wildlife dancing in the water. But one thing that he didn't know was it actually closed after over 30 years of performing, starting in 1958 and finishing in 1991. The show did close 22,000 performances later. So why can't the one in Paris shut? And not only shut, but the venue that it was held in, the Stardust, has actually now been demolished, and the owners using the Stardust name as part of their online casino business. And when we think of Stardust and you look back at the old films, slightly grainy and definitely not high definition, yeah, you can see the Stardust sign sort of standing up there and doing all the ritzy razzmatazz things. So what they've done, it's the sign for the Lido is actually was put into the Neon Museum in Las Vegas. It is what it says it is. It's a museum of neon signs, and it's there on display. I don't know too much about that because I've not been invited. It was an invite-only situation, so I'm not a Las Vegas fan. I don't know much about it. I've only just started researching, but it does turn out that the sign that they're purporting to be from the Stardust is actually not quite the actual one. The colours don't match up. It's like having a Google sign but with different colours to what the Google sign would be. So that's not very good when you think about it. I don't think people are going to care much. You're walking around this museum almost like a junkyard with neon lights. Some are illuminated, some aren't. Pay your money and get an hour to walk around and see what happens. So that's the Las Vegas Lido. So that closed down in 2006. 16 years later, and the Lido in Paris closed their doors for the final time with the Lido cabarets as we know it. The venue is still there. I have walked past, I've said, and seen it as a cinema. Really not as glamorous when you think about it. So what they will do, instead of having the big cabarets, they're going to be running shows, for want of a better expression. But that's exactly what they are. So from the beginning of December in 2023, they're going to be showing or performing A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. It's a musical. Prices starting at €29 and they go well all the way up really. You can for €110 sit in the gold category. No idea what that's going to mean at the moment. Never bought tickets for the Lido, be it for a show or for the cinema. But once the 60 performances of the musical have elapsed, they're going to be running the Rocky Horror Picture Show from end of February to the beginning of April. And it was written by Richard O'Brien, who is now in his 80s. Little interesting side note is when the Rocky Horror Show went on tour around the UK, the director at the time was a man called Vivian Ellicott. He was a Welsh lad, grew up doing all theatre stuff, acting, directing, and then becoming the manager of Wimbledon Theatre. He then later went on as the theatre manager of the Swansea Grand Theatre. After that time, he then became the manager of the Kenneth More Theatre in Ilford, just round the corner from where I live. He stayed there for 37 years. And during that time, I was actually performing and being backstage. It's purely amateur dramatic productions. Didn't get any money for it. It just took up part of my GCSE revision time. So happy days. I'm not going to say that's why I didn't do particularly well in my exams. That's for another podcast. However, the theatre, Kenneth More, was named after the English actor Kenneth More, who played the ghost of Christmas Present in the film adaptation of the book, Christmas Carol. He was, I say, the ghost of Christmas Present, whereby he played opposite a chap called Albert Finney. Now, for you film buffs out there, you will know that Albert Finney played Daddy Warbucks in the 1982 film version of Annie. And tying back to my old university education, I actually had to study another Charles Dickens' book called Hard Times, and that definitely was hard times for me. So now moving back to the original line of thought for this episode about Lido, we're going to look back a little bit at the beginning of Lido when it opened in 1946. It was actually a little bit further up the road at number 78 Avenue des Champs-Élysées, and it moved to where it is now back in 1977. It was really good. It had topless ladies, but also it had part of the cabaret. It had people singing, performing, such as Siegfried and Roy, which is they were magicians who ended up going over to Vegas, or being in Vegas I should say, and doing their little bit. But also it had Josephine Baker, Elton John, Laurel and Hardy for those comedy fans, Dalida, who I actually have seen a statue of. I didn't know who she was, and for those listening out there, especially my two boys, we have seen and rubbed her badunkadunks, which I should, 2 points I need to make here. The first is it's a statue, so don't worry, up in Montmartre. And the second point is I actually glossed over an Instagram post by Claudine Hemingway, who can be found on Instagram at Claudine Bleu Blonde Rouge. So thank you to her for having that post. I was just flicking through, randomly stumbled across that one. And also that performed at the cabaret side, I'm hoping she performed the cabaret side at the Lido, was Edith Piaf, which, listening to another podcast, Oliver G's The Earful Tower, I learnt that the word Piaf is slang for sparrow. So depending on the aspect of the story as to how she got her name, why she's called the little sparrow, that's just one aspect, but that's obviously her stage name. But before all of that took place, the Lido was actually an entertainment and swimming facility for citizens of Paris that weren't as lucky as the rich and famous, to be honest. However, how things have changed. So that could be where the pool came into things that my uncle's been referring to every time he mentions a story. It was in 1933 that the Lido, which was known as the Beach of Paris, it was forced to end its first life, and that was down to money problems, which is a bit of a recurring theme throughout not only the Paris Lido but also the one in Vegas. Production costs escalate, people want more money, the cost of feathers increases, productions go up, everyone's trying to be bigger and better than the last one. They ran shows for sort of 2-3 years at a time, and then as time went on, the gap between the new performances did change. It got a bit longer, I suppose, trying to save money on new sets and everything. But with the advent of better effects, pyrotechnics, animal inclusions, it does get a little bit pricey, I would imagine. So at the end of the Second World War, in 1946, 2 Italian building contractors, had to be brothers, Joseph and Louis Clerico, they rebought the Lido, and they came up with a good idea of redeveloping the venue, and they offered up a new show called Sans Rime ni Raison. So as I've said before, my French accent, pronunciation and understanding really isn't great, but in English it means without rhyme or reason. So if you want to Google translate that back into French, you should end up with what I was meant to have said. So they came up with the idea of not just having a show, but also adding a bit of dinner to it. So obviously you go in, you have a bit of a cabaret, and you also have a bit of food, so you can charge a bit more. Gross profits are better on food. Also on the drink, the longer you're there, the more you drink. Everyone's happy, you go out feeling great, you pass on the good news. Look, Lido's marvellous, all running smoothly. So what happened in 1948 was Margaret Kelly's dance troupe, the Bluebell Girls. They joined. Now, Margaret Kelly from Dublin, she took the girls who, as they were classically trained, unfortunately too tall for ballet. So ballet's loss, but the Lido and the Bluebell Girls gain. They require at the Lido, or they did, a minimum height of 1.75 m, which I believe is about 5'7". Now, I actually know a former Bluebell girl. She's a dance teacher. I know through my dance teaching association, and I can just only imagine the kind of life that she must have led while she was in the troupe, dancing at the Lido and elsewhere as one of these, I was going to say infamous, but one of these famous Bluebell girls. So another side step from the original conversation. Margaret Kelly, the founder of Bluebells, born in Dublin and then left Ireland and moved to Liverpool. She left school at the age of 14, moved to Germany, and then at age 20, just back in 1930, she moved to Paris. And it was here that she joined La Folie Bergère, which in 1886, Edouard Marchand came up with the idea of a music hall revue starring scantily clad dancers. Before she joined, 4 years prior, Josephine Baker was there in a costume consisting of a string of fake bananas. Incidentally, this is where Maurice Chevalier launched his career. So in 1939, she married Marcel Libovici, a musician who was working there, and they had 2 sons. But while she was pregnant with a second child, she was arrested and imprisoned in Besançon. In 1942, Marcel, who was Jewish, was arrested and taken to an internment camp in Gurs, which I believe is in southwest France. He was rescued by the resistance and smuggled back to Paris, where Margaret hid him until the liberation. However, she was interrogated by the Gestapo, suspecting that she was harbouring the fugitive. She never gave away his location, and the story formed the basis for a film called The Last Metro, or Le Dernier Métro, which is a 1980 film by François Truffaut. This film stars Catherine Deneuve and Gérard Depardieu, and from my limited knowledge, it's based around a theatre in Montmartre during the occupation of Paris. And seeing as I've totally left the whole point of the Lido, we're going to finish this little podcast here. But if you are interested in seeing a cabaret show, there are still plenty in Paris. 3 that come to mind is the cabaret on a boat that floats on the Seine. It's called Cabaret Burlesque. There is a Latin cabaret in the 5th called Paradis Latin. And I have also been told about a Crazy Horse cabaret in the 8th arrondissement, which has come as a personal recommendation to me. So if anybody has gone and they want to let me know what it's like, feel free to drop me a line. Or if you've got anything else that you wish to talk about, again, don't be shy. Come join me on my Instagram at an Englishman in Paris blog, or simply send me an email to coffeepot@anenglishmaninparis.blog. Thank you very much, and until next time. You've been listening to Paul, an Englishman in Paris, for Coffee Pot Conversations.
Coffee Pot Conversations.
Thank you for being a part of our latest episode of An Englishman in Paris, Coffee Pot Conversations. Your support and engagement means so much to me. Stay connected to our podcast by subscribing on your favourite platform. That way you won't miss any exciting conversations, stories, interviews and information I've recorded for you. If you have something you wish to share, a question to ask, or simply want to give a mention to someone, drop me a line at coffeepot@anenglishmaninparis.blog. Let's keep the conversation going, and remember, there's a big chance you're going to have it read out. As we start to close up for the episode, I want to once more extend my heartfelt appreciation for being a part of this community. Your enthusiasm and engagement will keep this podcast alive and thriving. So please, keep spreading the joy and enjoy life's little pleasures. Au revoir, and see you in the next episode.
Coming up on Coffee Pot Conversations.
We have interviews, we have recollections, and we have researched pieces. We may even have some coffee. So stay tuned to find out on An Englishman in Paris, Coffee Pot Conversations.
Coffee Pot Conversations.